everyone. Welcome to Living La Vita Loca podcast, a retro gaming podcast for some of your retro gaming needs. My name is Rich.
And my what? And my name is Rich.
Oh, wait, no. Because I am rich in racing history. And I was like, no,
I see what you've done.
That wasn't really what I was doing. I was just trying to freak you out. And I have.
Yeah,
it worked pretty well.
Good
There we
job.
go.
Good job. I hope you're pleased.
Yeah, no, yeah, I am kind of. So, just like to keep the spice alive in the relationship.
Is that it?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Well, we're on episode 96, you've got to like
96.
You've got to put a little bit more cayenne pepper in your food, we are going to be, I guess, this is our last week of Drive January.
Yeah.
And...
Many people using the hashtag?
No.
Cool.
Yeah, no. I wish they...
No judgment.
But the thing is...
worth a try.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I wish they would. No, I mean, I don't know how that works with like social media and stuff like that. It's like...
I think you pay people to get them to use it.
Yeah,
being cynical.
yeah. I mean, it is like one of those things that I definitely... If you've used a hashtag that is like popular at the time, I've seen a couple of people kind of like maybe look at your social, like as in, but very rarely does it actually work.
It used to work.
Yeah.
Like, not so much anymore, I don't think.
No. So, guys, don't worry about using the hashtag Drive January. I don't think it's necessary. We'll bring it back next January. It'll be fine.
That's good, because I keep finding driving games. Ones that I forgot I had.
Yeah, we've got lots to go on. I was having another, again, I'm not meaning to go back to, playing the hits and things, but I was having another, let's all stop talking about the tutorial and Driver, that talk about how hard Driver is at the end, like debate on Reddit again the other day. It was like...
Started more Driver-related flame wars.
Yeah. But I found quite a few people, like, that were sort of like, everyone needs to stop talk about that tutorial and like talk about the last level, and I'm like, that is like the worst, the Dark Souls of driving games.
Found my people.
Yeah. My, anonymous people hiding behind those little Reddit people's faces. So in the last week then, I thought it'd be really cool, for me personally on my side of things, to hit something that I haven't played a lot of the series, and I haven't played it for a long time, if I'm going to be honest, and that is Gran Turismo. Mm-hmm. And I know that you've got a big hitter sat there as well.
I do.
And you as us.
I, today, Faz, will be talking about Need for Speed Underground 2.
Nice. So I'm going to let you ride into the distance first.
Am I?
Cool. Yeah. I'm going to tell you a couple of bits that I'd learned about these games, that is, in just facts, sort of like... Yeah. Just that... Gran Turismo, so this one was so I'm playing the PSP version, going back to my PSP this week. It was the 4th best-selling game on the PSP.
Really?
Which, which I'm not shocked about, because it seems as though on most PlayStation consoles, Gran Turismo is pretty much lodged into the top 5, one version of it, on pretty much every generation of a PlayStation console.
That's interesting.
And this was the 4th best-selling PSP game.
Nice.
Where do you think Need for Speed Underground 2 sits in the best-selling PlayStation 2 games? There's no, like, oh, wow, that, like, carpet pull reveal of the situation. It's just between 1 and 100.
Oh, right, okay. High 30s?
64.
Oh, okay, all right.
Underground 1 was, like, 25th, I think it was.
Really?
Yeah, so... And then I dug a little bit deeper into Underground 2.
Yeah.
It was, so back in the day of 2010, there was something called ELSPA. I don't even know what that is. Basically, one of these shady organisations that kind of like tracks sales.
Right.
And games before, I guess probably before this period of time, would go silver selling, gold selling, platinum selling, double platinum selling, and diamond. And Need for Speed Underground 2 was a double platinum game in the UK. So in the United Kingdom, it sold really well.
Yeah.
And it was, I think, to be either double platinum or diamond, I think there was only about 20 games in those combined sections.
Really?
And Need for Speed Underground 2 was one of those games.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so really highly lauded in the United Kingdom, it seems.
But potentially not elsewhere? Is that what you're getting at? Or?
Well, I guess not. I mean, it was still the 64th best-selling PlayStation 2 game. So
the overall list that you were looking at for PlayStation 2 sales was like worldwide. Right.
And it just happened to be a pretty good selling UK game. And that the list was pre 2010, so it wasn't just PlayStation there.
Yeah. Okay.
I think, and it was like the third fastest. These are just fucking stupid stats, but they're fun to talk about.
Yeah,
because I think it's like
I didn't know any of them.
No, so. Well, and neither did I until about 15 minutes before the podcast. It was like I think it was like the third fastest selling game to hit double platinum.
Really?
After like San Andreas. And I think maybe a Gran Turismo. Like, as in, so you just think about that. I know it's crazy, isn't it? Like, as in Vice City. So you just think about like it's in
good company.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's just United Kingdom stats, but it's interesting that where we reside that people really resonated with this game.
I mean, that might explain why it was so cheap to pick up. If I'm being honest, there's so many copies of them.
My house is made of them.
So yeah, let's talk about it. Let's get into this then. My notes tell me 2004.
Did you hear my tummy rumble on the podcast?
I did. Whether or not the microphone did, I don't know. I was just going to ignore it. But
also,
it's fine.
Also, a 37-year-old man saying tummy rumbled.
Yes, I was going to ignore that too. But here we are.
That's
you want to talk about it, chap?
My wrestling name.
You're right. Tummy rumble. Going to leave that one there. Right, 2004. I used to have this on the GameCube.
Oh, right, okay, cool.
Where one assumes, considering how much more expensive it would be to get on the GameCube, it did not sell as well as the PlayStation 2.
Mm-hmm. I didn't have those stats in my back pocket.
No, it's sorry. Fine. I wasn't expecting you to. I spent absolutely flipping hours on this back in the day. And the level of car customization that you had, and putting neons on it, it was like the films. But the bit that I really, really enjoyed, and if you've listened to the last episode where I was talking about Wreckfest and all that kind of stuff, it will probably come as no surprise that I really, really like the drag racing bit. I still think it's probably one of the better versions of drag racing in a video game, where it's basically you're just on a lane. And you have to time your gear shifts, and then you just tap left or right to change lane to avoid oncoming traffic. And yeah, I was absolutely obsessed with them back in the day. Starting over again with this, they're less fun when you're in a Peugeot 106 and you haven't done anything to it. I was like, why am I being beaten so badly? I'm in a stock Peugeot 106. That'll be it.
Yeah, I don't remember that bit.
yeah, exactly. Like, it's very easy in my mind's eye to be like, oh my god, it was so fast, and then playing it this time where it's doing all the bits that make you think it's fast with like the camera shaking and the motion blur, and then you look at the speedometer and you're like 40. So yeah, some illusions have been shattered with this revisit, I am afraid. So yeah, you've got I've got a rundown here of like the soundtrack is fine, right? It starts on a bit of a high note with a Riders on the Storm remix. The rest of it I can't remember.
Yeah, I have. Sorry, just chip in because it's just come back to me. But almost like certainly it might have been Underground 1 maybe, but around that period of time, so would have been like 15, 16. So kind of where you were too young to kind of go out drinking, but you go out to your friends and maybe have like house parties and stuff.
Yeah.
And sort of like of the other parents of friends that were a bit more accommodating to that kind of thing. Or you can have 8 or 10 people around, you have a bit of music until 2 a.m. or whatever. You can have a stubby beer or something like that. You can maybe have 2 girls, 6 boys, but be nice to the girls and I'll look after them. I'll stay up and make sure they're okay. You're not doing anything nefarious. And I've got like sort of memories of like maybe dancing to like Yeah by Usher, like as in like on like whilst playing this game, like as in like a lot of people kind of gathered round like a tiny little sort of 10-inch screen playing this game, and just like era basically.
I am so pleased that you have painted that picture for me because the overarching theme through all of this is, my god, it is such a product of its time. It really is. Like, I know we go back and look at a lot of older stuff, but like I think this is the only game I've played where my God, I felt old afterwards. I felt so old. That time where you are playing this game on a 10-inch CRT TV with playing in the background feels like such a long time ago.
It really does. It's like...
And it's over 20 years ago, lest we forget. You know, like, it's... And
well, I mean, Usher's just in the Super Bowl and looked so old.
But it's all that kind of stuff, and then you add in like the rest of the soundtrack on the game itself, and you're just like, oh my God, like that is distinct, like noughties, EA soundtrack tick box exercise. Frankly,
it's like we were like 2 years away from being in the club with our homies, and now. This podcast is our club with our homies. Yeah,
basically. And like, but I think you've hit the nail on the head, right? Because for me, it's like, because I'm basically the same age for all the listeners out there. So yeah, like now you mention it, I get the distinct impression that were I slightly older, I probably wouldn't have gelled with this quite as much. Yeah. Like if I was actually able to drive, I don't think this would have been nearly as entertaining. And I've got here like. Why did I spend so long on this on the GameCube? And like, and I do wonder if it's because like maybe there weren't as many decent racing games on the GameCube, or maybe I couldn't play Grand Theft Auto, so I couldn't have that feeling of hurtling around an open world city at night or anything like that. But like, it just for whatever reason I went back to it this time and was like, this feels so dated. Like I know EA will routinely chase trends and all that kind of stuff, or they always used to at least. And this feels like such a product of that.
Maybe it was just like there was so many copies kicking around. You found one in your sandwich or something.
Well, maybe. Yeah. Oh,
Need for Speed Underground 2 in my sandwich.
Put that to the pile. So like, it's not a bad game, right? Like it's got some character to it. It does feel like that kind of EA, like we're down with the kids, right? Kids kind of thing. When you're looking back with like. Cynical vision 20 odd years later, like it's quite easy to go like, oh yeah, that feels like it's laser targeted to 15-year-olds. And I mean, even some of the lingo that you get, where I mean, no one calls it lingo. Prime example. But like, you look at some of the bits and bobs. So like, you've got a lot of car customization, all that. And I know we kind of touched on it a little bit with Wreckfest in the other episode. But with this is definitely that case of you buy the next most expensive bit, car runs better, you finish better. If you don't finish first, that's it, you've failed. And that, for me...
Sounds like life.
Well, yeah, it does feel kind of like life. But that's exactly the kind of thing that... racing games nowadays would try and avoid, really.
So like a point system or something.
Like the progression can feel a bit dead-ended.
I do have that distinct memory of EA racing games around that time and stuff like that, where it was like you genuinely had to be the only one that won.
You win everything, or you may as well not bother. And so like the entire city is there for you to explore. You've got various dots of events that you can go and drive into, as well as garages and all that kind of stuff. There's not much in the way of like helpful navigation for any of it, which is kind of not too bad of an issue, really. Like the city's still fun to drive around. The snag that I was finding is that the handling is definitely geared towards drift and making you slide, but there's so little give in any of the like roadside scenery. Like most roads will have barriers. Those barriers will not bend or break or anything like that. There's nothing in front of them. There's not like a curb or anything like that or a pavement to give you a little bit of a leeway if you just miss the turn. So it feels kind of weirdly unforgiving, despite encouraging you to go sideways a lot of the time.
Okay.
Arguably, it could be that it's trying to teach you how to drift, because there are drift events in here. But at the same time, it felt a little bit like it was just kind of being a little bit mean. A little bit. Just a little bit. So I did wonder if it was, kind of a symptom of, well, we've got this big city, but are we able to actually put the kind of processing power and the oomph behind, making it accommodating or deep, or just big.
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
think they just went with just big.
Just big.
Same as like the you have two weathers, like wet or dry. It's perpetual night.
Yeah.
You know, there's no
That rain, that neon-soaked rain in your eyes.
And I tell you what,
like shards coming down.
yeah, it really is. And like because of the lighting system they've got in place, and the fact that the roads are so often so slick, it's very difficult to see what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I sound just like my dad. Like driving at night is really difficult. Like the lights were really dazzling, and
There was some weird like lingo on the radio. There was hip hop,
the
beatbox
noises, and everyone's cars had extra lights, and and I was just going around, and I was like, I feel so old. I really did. And I mean, one of my notes here, there's a story kind of, I guess, who cares?
yeah.
You know, it's when you crash, it's like toy cars, because it's a licensed game, and they weren't allowed to put any damage modelling on it.
Yeah.
So everything just kind of bounces around a little bit awkwardly. And it's like, if you're going to such lengths to kind of immerse you in this world and make you think you are some kind of like cool nighttime racing person out on the streets.
You described that so perfectly.
Yeah, but like
nighttime racing person.
but then just having the cars kind of bounce around a little bit when you cock it up just feels a bit like, well, cool.
Yeah.
This is what my Scale X-Trick did, you know? Back when I had real toys and all that kind of stuff. So I felt like some of the magic had been lost, you know. It's really weird to go back and replay it a bit and go like, you know what, like I'm really finding it difficult to kind of rekindle some of that old spark I had for it. Don't get me wrong, I still enjoy the drag racing. I do. I really like the mechanics, and that has sent me on this journey to try and find a game that will basically take those mechanics and lift and shift and put them somewhere else.
Yeah.
Where I can see
Less
what's going on. Where
less threatening to me.
Where I'm not going to be wiped out by a cab because I couldn't distinguish it from the reflections of the streetlights.
Just trying to move it somewhere where everyone doesn't have tribal tattoos at their face.
Yeah, that would be nice for a start. I don't need people gyrating on my bonnet, thank you. I'm perfectly happy just getting from A to B.
I do. It's the AA man putting a new battery in with Citroen C1.
Was he in his hot pants?
Yeah. Dance for me, monkey.
Sorry, sir. I'll be with you in a couple of minutes. Got to put my jukes on. I mean, like, it's the game is solid, right? Like, it is solid. I don't think there's anything like fundamentally broken with it. It's just that I think I like the component parts more than I like the whole thing. In the cold light of day, some 20 odd years later, I've got some fond memories of it, but I think they are staying as memories, I think, for me. And I've got a little note to myself up here, Parking Garage Rally, because one of the events I don't remember. Well, it's a recent thing.
Oh, right.
So okay. you may not remember.
Sorry, I don't remember.
Well, one of the events it goes in on drift, right? Pretty big.
Yep.
This Need for Speed malarkey, and some of the tracks are really tight, windy ones, almost around like shipping containers and stuff like that in a car park, right? Parking Garage Rally is like a more recent indie game. I think it came out last year, about September last year, and it's kind of Sega Saturn style graphics, but you are drifting around a car park in like basically rally cars, and it sits somewhere in the little gap between Sega Rally and the drift events from Need for Speed Underground 2, at least to my mind. I appreciate it's not quite the same, but that is a really good example of something that has just taken one of those specific bits of Need for Speed Underground 2 that I quite enjoyed and put it in a slightly different setting with a slightly different setup, but scratches the kind of itch. So if I could do the same with the drag mechanics, I'm golden.
Just tell someone. Just get them to develop it.
The search continues. Let's say that. I haven't quite nailed it yet.
We need more developers to listen to this podcast, clearly.
Make me a game.
Can you make these games, please? Here's the list.
That's basically where I sit on it. Like, it's fine. It's fun. Like, if you've picked up and you've got really, really strong nostalgia for it, you will have a good time for a bit. But for me, going back now, like I genuinely found it a little bit difficult, and like I said, it feels in hindsight like it was laser targeted at the age group we were, you know, when it came out. And in that respect, like, you've got to give it credit because, like you said, it sold like hotcakes. So it clearly did something right. Like, there was definitely a market for it. But I think it's telling that you've got what Need for Speed, like Heat, and like they've done so many Need for Speeds since, and different variations that all have different styles and all that. And I think that's telling.
I was going to ask if you didn't mind, like, so talking about the. Did you play Most Wanted on the Vita last year?
Yeah.
And that was one of those podcasts where I think you were quite ill because we did it remotely. How different does that feel? Like, I assume that was probably the last one you played, Need for Speed.
Yeah, it probably was actually. So Most Wanted feels much more grown up, just in how it looks and what it's trying to do, and I think that was probably. In fact, talking about it is a good illustration because, like, I get the impression that Need for Speed Underground 2 came out when people were starting to, or developers and publishers were starting to realise that, you know, people are getting a bit older. We can market to older people, but I think there arguably was still a fundamental level of, but they're still young, right? We're not marketing to adults. Whereas Most Wanted feels like someone went, okay, well, we know we need to market to adults to some degree, but they're probably still going to be like older teens playing this, but also it's on a Vita, so they're probably going to be, you know, so I think there was a little bit more consideration for the fact that they're going to have an audience that are not just going to be like obsessed with, you know, Fast and Furious 1 and 2 or whatever.
It's funny because Fast and Furious 2, sorry, Too Fast, Too Furious.
Let's
call it its proper name.
My mistake.
The masterpiece that it was. That came out the summer 2003, and then Need for Speed Underground 1 came out like in the UK November 2003.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just like
going back, you can see it. Like, it's plastered all over it that it's just so like laser focused on capturing that crowd. So I mean, in that respect, like perfectly well played on their part. You know, it worked. And yeah, like I say, I think it's telling that we've gone through so many iterations since. Even when the Need for Speed series has gone back to doing the kind of underground racing thing, it's got a different veneer to it. So like, there's been a lot more like street art and stuff like that in some of the more recent ones, and all that kind of stuff. So like it's trend chasing basically, but it's solid. It's a solid game. It is not necessarily one that I'm gonna dig out terribly often ever again. But you know, so to my mind, it's a 4 or a 5 out of 10, and like I think a 4 would be a bit harsh. But it's my review of my podcast, so I'm going to give it a 4. But that's my personal view. I can imagine that you get the right person that's got that little bit more nostalgia for it. That's going up. That score quite easily.
No, that almost went a different way. I was like, anyway, no, cool, fair enough. That is in. I think that like. I probably feel the exact same way as you in so much that obviously not playing it recently at all, but the overriding memory is almost of just the drag racing. Like, do you know what I mean? That feeling like the bit, like the best part of the game, the gimmick, like is in, you know, whenever one of those races came up, I was like, this is the one this is what I've been waiting for. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I can understand that it's like, it is of its time, but you know, fond memories but then they can stay memories, it's fine. Yeah,
definitely. Like, it was exactly the kind of game that, like you said, you'd play around a mate's house and all that kind of stuff. So like a lot of the fun nostalgia was playing with other people as well, and all that kind of stuff. And
cool. So let's talk a little bit more, I guess, adult upmarket spectrum, maybe. What I would perceive to certainly be, and probably a grand way to sort of finish off Drive January and talk about what I don't personally necessarily perceive this, but I think a lot of the video gaming world might see it as like maybe the king, or certainly like, you know, a royal member of the Drive industry. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Certainly not the jester. So yeah, you know, Gran Turismo. And I thought, I'm going to play this on the PSP because I know that this kind of has a bit of a checkered sort of history, and, you know, an interesting history, certainly from a development point of view. I was really intrigued to see what it was like. And I've not really played, I don't think, in anger, certainly. And there are angry moments with Gran Turismo. Probably since, I'd say, Gran Turismo 4, probably, I'd say. And I'm aware that that's obviously back on the PlayStation 2. So this is probably the most modern Gran Turismo that I've personally played. This is so. And funnily enough, this was released in 2009. It was actually announced alongside the PSP in 2004. It was announced. It had a 5-year development cycle. It literally came out 2 weeks after MotorStorm Arctic Edge on 2009, which I've reviewed previously, and I've mentioned for a reason because I'll come back to it in a little bit. But it was just so interesting just to see. I'm like, right, okay, so it got announced in 2004 with the PSP. MotorStorm didn't actually come out as an actual franchise till 2007 on the PlayStation 3, and then the PSP game came out before the Gran Turismo PSP game did. It was just really funny. And so I looked into the reasons for that, because I remember at the time thinking, when I had a PSP, I was like, oh yeah, Gran Turismo, can't wait to play Gran Turismo on PSP. And I never actually did, because I got rid of my PSP before it even actually fucking came out. So the reasons were that I think so. Polyphony, I think they're called, the developers, who are an in-house sort of Sony studio. The only thing they actually develop is Gran Turismo games, pretty much. They were really, as you'd expect, really insistent that they were like, we have to make the PSP game. No one else can do that. But they were also, I think, just from a manpower point of view, like just couldn't actually make it happen while they were making Gran Turismo 4 and Gran Turismo 5. So they really kind of, I guess, were just short-handed. Yeah. So they kind of kept pushing back Gran Turismo on the PSP. And then also, there's a bit of a misconception floating around that it really struggled to get the game onto a UMD. But that wasn't the case. It's only like 1 gigabyte, like the game, which obviously, like for a UMD, I don't know thereabouts, but certainly I read afterwards that it wasn't about the size of getting it onto a UMD. It was just about the performance of the PSP unit itself and what they wanted to produce as a game. They wanted to bring a whole Gran Turismo experience to the PSP. Did they succeed doing that? It's infamously no, but is it still a good game? There's a lot to like about this game. You can tell, even with a struggle development, that 5-year sort of span of when it was announced to when it came out, like even with that, there is still a very, very good driving game in this, and it's still at the top end of certain aspects of driving games. So what actually is in this version then? So there's a lot of content. The thing that's missing properly that people got really annoyed about was like a proper Gran Turismo single player, go through your licenses, take part in championships sort of single player thing, which, as you can imagine, a lot of people are probably like, we've waited 5 years for this and you've not given us a fully fledged Gran Turismo experience. So there was a lot of ill will towards that, but I think once people got over that and realised how good the game actually is on the PSP, like in terms of what they've given you, I think people are a bit more accepting of it. But yeah, so there's over 800 cars to purchase with in-game credits. Like, as in, so
that's ridiculous.
I know, 800 cars that is in. So and there's 35 tracks, so there's loads of tracks. There are some car tuning options. From what I remember from playing Gran Turismos of the time and what I've read about it, they do seem a bit slimmed down compared to what you would get on a home console. But for me personally, that actually works out quite well, because I've spoken about this previously, where you have lots of car tuning sort of options and there's just too many, and whereas actually this had probably the right amount for me. There's all the sort of license pageantry and everything in it. Just it looks, even the landing screen, I know it sounds really weird, the sort of the main menu screen, it looks like a BMW, like it looks like an Audi, it looks like, you know, a high class car, sort of like, you know, like you imagine now when like you have your sort of in a modern day car, you have your sort of, I guess, Surface tablet probably at the front there where that has all your information on. That's what the PSP game looks like to me. It's really funny. Going back to those 800 cars then, what's probably really annoying about it, is that you can only buy certain cars from certain dealers on certain days. So there's an in-game calendar. It doesn't ever really explain how the days pass. They just, as you play the game, this calendar ticks on. But you can only buy from 4 different types of dealers on a certain day. So to keep you kind of ticking over and in the game and keep on looking, when you earn enough credits, which I'll speak about how you do that in a minute, you can only, so you'd have to sort of wait for certain days and stuff. So
it's kind of like online service thing without the online service, right?
Yeah. And it's so weird to see that from a game from back in 2009. And I was like, oh, wow, that's crazy. And it was like, you know, I'd be sitting there thinking, and I'm not, as you obviously probably realise, you know, like I'm not a motorhead at all, and, you know, but you still want the cool cars. And then you sort of be like, oh, why... I'm doing why the Dacia dealer like this, and I think of like all the cars are absolutely awful at that time. Do you know what I mean? And I'm almost like, this is a ridiculous sort of thing. Like, and I don't want any of these cars. I've wasted a whole day not like having dealers that I don't want these cars for. It was just a very strange. I don't know if it was. I feel like, and I've got no evidence to back this up with whatsoever, but I feel like it might have been a mechanism where it's like, almost the game couldn't work by offering all 800 cars at once, like in a huge list or something like that. So it was like it had to kind of spin round on a calendar and like sort of, you know, do something like that. It's probably not true, but I just feel like there was some weird working of the game won't work if we have all 800 available at once.
I don't know, like it's a clever way of keeping you kind of engaged with it, I guess,
that
as well.
That might be what it is.
In a certain way. But like, full disclosure, I very nearly reviewed Gran Turismo 4.
Oh, yeah.
For this. Didn't, because that has like a kind of dealership kind of system like that. All I could afford that I thought was decent to start with was a Honda Civic, and my wife found it hilarious that I was coming in dead last every single time, doing like driving sensibly around these big circuits and completely unable to get enough money to buy anything better to progress.
I feel like, though, and I was going to come on to this point, that's just part of the Gran Turismo experience. It was weirdly fun. You've got to have that slow, shitty family car like at the start. You've got to have one. The game almost like makes you do that because it's such a simulation game. It's like, and it wants to show off how well it does the handling of the cars and the difference between having a car that can't, you know, tops out at like 67 miles an hour, like isn't going around a racing track. The concept of it is absolutely insane to think that you'd have a Renault Megane sort of like, you know, like on these tracks, these amazing tracks, like, and then it knows fine well that you want to progress later on in the game. It gives you the terrible coal at the start so that you can make a diamond when you get better. So it's very clever in its way that it almost like, it doesn't matter how many Gran Turismos there have been, it always seems to certainly follow that that progression where you go from rags to riches, which is really cool. Riches. Wish we had 2 of you. So that's weird. Speaking of having multiple people, there was a multiplayer mode, obviously not available anymore, but when I looked into it, and this is probably one of those things that I'm a little bit annoyed about when I hear about it. So in 2009, it had you versus 3 other people that you could have in ad hoc mode. Now, I bemoaned about Burnout Legends, which came out in 2005, having just you and 3 AI, for example, opponents, or 3 actual opponents on multiplayer. 2 weeks earlier, like I say, Motorstorm Arctic Edge came out, and you had 10 opponents, and so much more going on in the actual race than you would do on Gran Turismo. So that's where it almost feels like, a game you announced in 2004 still has 2004 aspects to it, and you think that's acceptable? Like,
800 cars.
All the cars that you can cycle through, and they could be in loads of different cars, but so and that, like I said, that goes for any of the races that you take part in the actual single player part of it as well. So you only have 3 opponents, and it feels just a bit galling that is the case. Like I say, I do want to kind of sort of still give it its dues for how it looks and how it handles, and just, you know, I think that for a 2009 game now on your PSP, it still looks really, really good. I think that if it came out in 2005 looking like it did in 2009, I think that the PSP would have just been, they would have just sold so many of them. I mean, even if it's the 4th best-selling game on the PSP in 2009, not that the PSP was on its wane there. I mean, I've spoke about how many good games there are from 2009, but certainly I feel like it would have just boosted it even further if it just been a little bit more on schedule. So, like I said, there are detrimental points to this, and it is probably around the single player and what people actually get back bang for your buck. So there are 2 parts of single player. The part that is the worst part of it is almost that it doesn't offer any narrative drive or story mode or anything like that, or anything that you can kind of develop your way through. There's 2 parts. There's a driving challenge part of it, and the single race / time trial / drift challenge. In the single race, time trial, and drift challenge, there's nothing tying them together. You can just pick a track that you would then go and do a single race, and you either do it against 3 AI opponents or you do a time trial on it. Which, when you're driving a shitty Renault Megane around these soulless sort of race tracks, it just feels so annoying, really, and frustrating that they thought that was acceptable. That is in. So there is some sort of progression where you can start off as so you do get classes. So you start off on class E, and then your AI opponents get gradually better. I guess it's hard for the game to cater for, because you can earn credits in the driving challenge, which I'll go on to in a minute, because that is the fun bit. You can earn credits quite early on, so you could buy quite good cars and then progress from the E class to the A class sort of. It just didn't seem to tie together very well in terms of thought process wise. It was like it was almost like the sole goal was just to buy these 800 cars and just have a soulless experience.
It does sound like it's just throwing you into a grind.
And for what reason? Like, I didn't really know.
Well, weirdly, it reminds me of Ridge Racer on the PSP when you put it like that.
And it just, it was just a bit like, I didn't really kind of understand that part of it. It just...
PS Vita, sorry.
You'd love the PSP game. The PS Vita wasn't as good, was it? For you? So it was just how many representations of real life cars do I need in a video game? Like, it's in,
800.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not like Pokemon that they're all got something different, or they all like crazy fucking like hammers or some shit. It's like, like they're all just kind of
got to store them all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, how much proprietary memory card memory am I using up here? Like, it's in storing all of my cars.
Do you really need to buy that multi-story car park?
There just wasn't enough narrative drive to the single player modes. So there was going back to the drifting, like I've talked about Need for Speed. The drifting part of the single player part of the game that is this sort of purchasing zone effectively for cars, that's quite fun. There is some skill to that. It takes a little while to kind of understand how to get that to happen, especially going back to that sort of like crazy ass family car situation where you're driving something that is not meant to be drifted around a track. And they've catered for that. They've catered for the feel of that and the look of that. It definitely feels much nicer when you buy a better car and start going, this car can actually kick its back end out and have a bit of speed going through a corner. Trying to drift a slow, blocky car is inherently really difficult because they're not built to do that. So therefore, the challenge is almost harder for the worst cars than the ones that are actually supercars. There is something to that. That part of it feels pretty soulless. The driving challenge part of it, I wish they'd just stuck the landing on this a little bit more. And what I mean by that is that, so I'll start off by saying this, that I completed, inverted commas, the driving challenge part of this game in 2 hours.
Right.
When I say completed, so you can get bronze, silver, gold trophies in this, and you start to get into that trophy sort of system of the PlayStation. I bronzed my way through this in 2 hours. So you could spend much more time trying to get those gold sort of...
Perfecting it.
Yeah. Now, this is where this was much more Gran Turismo-esque. So you kind of get you've got to stop on a dime in a certain stopping zone in your shitty Renault Megane. And you've got to get there under 16 seconds. And you can see how there's a massive level of challenge where it's like, oh, for the gold, you've got to get in 14 and a half seconds. And you're thinking, I've only just managed the bronze in terms of like felt like I was perfecting it to get there quick enough, but also stop within that tiny little zone. Yeah. Or get round this corner without touching the sides, etc. And, it's like, just take this horrendous corner in this really wank car that we've given you. It's just like, there is just some fun to that, and you can see that they've just thought about it. But for it to only last sort of 2 hours, even that, like I say, there is some more distance in it, if you want to, really perfect it. I was genuinely done in one sitting, and I was like, I really enjoyed that. Could I not have had more of that? There was definitely more of that could have been had. One of the funny parts of that, actually, that I really enjoyed was one of the parts of the driving challenge of getting your license was celebrated corners from around the world.
And lovely.
I just thought that sounds so much like an Alan Partridge sort of segment.
It really does.
Celebrated corners. Oh, but at the same time, it was actually they were really fun. It was there were these. It was further on in the license experience, if you will, where and they'd given you they were like, oh, try this specific car for this corner and stuff, and it was like a chicane somewhere, and it was cool. Do you know what I mean? And they gave you can have the driving line on if you want to, or you can take it off if you want more challenge. So I think that because I was playing it for the purpose of the podcast, I was getting through it. But I really did enjoy that part, and I could have spent more time with that to try and perfect it and get that arcade feeling of I could play this over and over and get better at it. But it just felt like I kind of wanted more content there as well. That is in a bit of variation and maybe a few more bits of that.
It definitely sounds like the kind of concession for the fact that it's on a handheld, right? That's what you'd be playing if you were on the bus.
Yes,
right?
yeah, and I think that's probably what it kind of... I think that they had it in their head that they thought that would be what people would want from this, almost. That is in, and also I felt like they were being a little bit lazy about it as well, kind of going back to that cardinal sin of we are making a port for the PSP that isn't a complete package, and we can kind of get away with it a little bit. Especially knowing what I know now about the development sort of struggles that they were having in terms of, and when the struggles feel like actually we just don't have enough people to want to make this game, which is a shame because, like I say, it sold so well. So yeah, all in all, playing this game now, and I think I kind of am reviewing it from a playing it in 2009 mindset as well, almost. That it's like, I think if I'd seen this in 2005, it probably would have been one of the best games I've ever played. Do you know what I mean? And then I was a bit like, but I can see, again, I gave MotorStorm 9 out of 10. Do you know what I mean? On the PSP. And I just didn't have as much fun with this.
Yeah.
And there wasn't as much... Whilst it looks amazing, and it feels like one of the best driving games you can get for the PSP, absolutely, they just kind of fumbled a few things in terms of the content sort of proportionality and what they thought that gamers probably would want out of it. Have 800 cars.
I was going to say, it does feel like you could probably have still achieved wonderful things with only having, say, 400 cars.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Yeah. Have 800 cars on 35 tracks, have 17 tracks, 400 cars, and just add a little bit more content to the driving challenge.
Yeah.
It felt like, and I don't know if Gran Turismo kind of has this problem, maybe a little bit sometimes where they make it look incredible and play incredible. Do they have the right balance of fun and simulation, as we spoke about the entire way through this month of Drive January hashtag?
There's definitely a sweet spot, isn't there?
Yeah, and you can probably tell, and people, anybody that's listened to all these 4 podcasts that we've done over these weeks will tell that we, and all the ones we've done previously as well, that we probably skew a bit more for the fun, crazy sort of content.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's something to be said for, like we said with Wreckfest, you can have that simulation and you can have the fun. You just need to find the right balance.
Yeah.
So when this game does that, it does a good job. It didn't do it often enough for me. So I give it a 7 out of 10, I think. It's still a really good game. I still recommend anybody that has a PSP or intends to play PSP games to give this a go if you've not, and you will still have a really good driving experience. I just know for a fact that I'd rather play MotorStorm, for example, or Wipeout. Those two sort of games that they are like the creme de la creme for me in terms of driving games. This is going to sound ridiculous, but like just to round off the month, then, is there anything that we've played, that I've played or you've played, that really stand out to you to think that actually, have a little look back at the scores, and sort of have a little think and see, is there anything that I haven't got anything in mind necessarily? I'm just filling gaps in the podcast right now with my voice. Just whilst I look back and think, what was the thing that I enjoyed the most, or the experience I enjoyed the most this month?
Well, I'll tell you what, shall I do a quick rundown on the scores?
Yes, please. That's what I was hoping might happen.
So, sitting pretty at 4 out of 10. We had Need for Speed Underground 2.
Feels a bit harsh now, doesn't it?
Maybe a little, but I think I stand by it. Like that's a very personal score. That 5 out of 10, Formula 1 Championship Edition. 6 out of 10, 18-wheeler Pro Trucker, Daytona USA and Formula 1. 7 out of 10, Sega Rally and Gran Turismo on the PSP. And then 8 out of 10, we have Dirt Rally 2, EA Sports WRC and Wreckfest.
Okay. It's interesting, isn't it, that the more modern games, not for any reason necessarily, but 3 quite more modern games seem to be sat nearer the top, maybe. Or
well, I do wonder if what you were just saying about hitting that balance between simulation and fun and accessibility, I do wonder if that is, the result of 20 odd years, 30 odd years of developing and honing these things.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, like, I think it's quite telling that, certainly from my ones, like the arcadey leanings are shining through, and all that. I mean, like, I was just sitting here, you talking about Gran Turismo and all that kind of stuff, thinking like, oh yeah, I should play more Gran Turismo. But then that was very, very quickly overtaken by a desire to play more Ridge Racer.
Yeah.
And I think like that, I think it's quite telling that like I definitely have a lean. So like I guess that's my big caveat with all the scores I've given this month is, bear in mind that I just gravitate more towards like the arcadey end of racers anyway.
You can choose to not listen to our podcast and not listen to those leanings.
Other options are available.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, go. You can find other simulation more based podcasts. It's interesting to me though that kind of looking back at all the scores, I feel like they all sound fair, and certainly from the ones that I've given and what I've listened to for yourself as well. And it's funny that Dirt Rally 2 sits there with EA, WRC and Wreckfest, and they all 3 of those, like you say, they seem to have that really good balance of simulation and fun. Probably with the exception of Dirt Rally 2, that feels really simulation-y, but they just do it so well. Like they just,
The other thing that comes to mind is that they're all the ones that probably have the most interesting trackside scenery. And like we've said previously about racetracks, just I think it was when we talked about Formula 1, like racetracks could just inherently be dull.
Yeah.
Like not all the time, obviously, but there is a tendency there. So, I wonder if there's something to that. But
I think that although they aren't necessarily the best reviewed games out of the list and things, I really enjoy the idea of the Sega Blue Sky of 18-wheeler and Daytona, and thinking that feels like the place that I want. It sounds ridiculous if you said this is the world, and these are all the driving games you can go and visit and stuff and things like that. Like I'd be going to visit that part of the world first, probably.
Yeah, and I do wonder if, like, perhaps were we to do this again, I think like Outrun 2 or 2006 kind of thing might be a good one to look at, because I do wonder if that would be that kind of nice marrying of like kind of modern sensibilities, but also Sega Rally type drifty, slidey handling and arcadey shenanigans and all that. I can't help but feel like my kind of as of 2025, my perfect racing game is going to be sitting somewhere around the kind of Outrun and Ridge Racer end of the scale. But we'll keep tinkering and dabbling and see.
Yeah, that was initially on my list, and then I kind of probably skewed a bit more simulation-y because I've, as you've said previously, probably had more leanings towards arcadey sort of races. So I felt like I probably should have a little sort of look at them. And actually, they've come out pretty well for me as well, and also another positive has just been the competitions that I've the little bits of competition that I've had, tiny bits of competition that I've had with friends and, even people that I don't know from across the internet. It's sort of, having fun on these games and stuff, and it just shows you that, for me personally, driving games is just one of those things that feel quite universal, that you could just go, right, okay, everyone hold R2 or whatever trigger button it is, go forward. As you can. Yeah, exactly, and just see how you can get on.
Well, I'll tell you what, while we're kind of basically doing honourable mentions as well, I do want to give a shout out to like the F-Zeros of the world and Extreme G and like Wipeout and stuff like that. Like, they were also on like my list of ones. I very nearly did a sci-fi one in there and didn't. So
don't need wheels to go fast.
Yeah, exactly. So I hope to get round to one of them at some point. I don't know when, but yeah, I think they would probably have rated reasonably highly as well.
Yeah. No, cool. Okay, right. Well, we hope you enjoyed this month of the driving games of #DriveJanuary. Yeah, get that on there. #Usher.
Just in time for February.
So we'll kind of, I don't know, we're not like resuming normal, or anything, but we'll do a couple of because
fewer driving games.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A bit more free play fortnightly and stuff, and hopefully have some guests coming up and things. So, thanks again for all your support, and we will speak to you guys again soon.
Cheers.